Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone was arrested on Friday by federal agents and charged with 7 felonies. None of the charges had anything to do with Russian collusion or election meddling, but you'd never know that from the penalties he faces. If convicted, Stone could die in prison. Nobody in Washington seems to find that punishment excessive. Many have cheered it. Officially, Stone was charged with lying, something most of our political elite engage in every day. But his real crime was flamboyance. Stone has spent the last 40 years giving the finger to the people in charge. In the end, they got him. They always do. Stone's arrest is already fading from the headlines, replaced by the latest political crisis of the moment or some new skirmish in the ongoing culture wars. Soon we'll forget it ever happened. But before we do, it is worth taking just a moment to consider a few basic questions about it, if only because nobody else is going to. First, why did the Justice Department stage what was, in effect, a military assault on Roger Stone's house? Stone himself asked that question on ABC over the weekend. Watch.
The idea that a 29-member SWAT team in full tactical gear with assault weapons would surround my house, that I would open the door looking down the barrel of assault weapons, that I would be frog-marched out front, barefooted, and handcuffed when they simply could have
Roger, let me just,
contacted me.
Let me
I think people need to know about
that. Yeah, but as you know, it's pretty standard for that to happen.
That's pretty standard, as you know. But is it pretty standard to send dozens of federal agents with rifles to arrest an unarmed 66-year-old man who's been charged with a nonviolent crime? Well, no, it is not standard. It is shocking, and any honest person who pays attention could tell you that. Roger Stone, who was there, says there were 29 agents on the scene, along with 17 vehicles, 2 of them armored, and a helicopter overhead. If that's an accurate accounting, it means the feds sent more armed men to Roger Stone's house in Fort Lauderdale than they did to Osama bin Laden's compound in Pakistan, just for some perspective on this. So what was the justification for doing that? Prosecutors knew perfectly well that Stone was not a flight risk. He's broke. He doesn't even have a valid passport. They could simply have called his lawyer and told him to surrender. That's the actual standard in cases like this. But they didn't do that. Instead, they went in with guns drawn. So who decided to do that? And how much did it cost taxpayers? We spent the last 2 days trying to answer those questions. And it tells you a lot about contemporary America that we couldn't. We still have no idea. The Justice Department wouldn't answer us. The White House, which supposedly oversees the Justice Department, didn't even respond. Maybe they don't know the answer to those questions. Possible. They don't control Robert Mueller. Nobody controls Robert Mueller. Mueller can send armed men to your home to roust you from bed at gunpoint just because he feels like it, and there's nothing you or anyone else can do about it. Mueller has an unlimited budget and no timetable. He doesn't have to answer questions. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, to whomever he wants. He cannot be fired. Mueller is the single most powerful person in America, and yet nobody voted for him. He is a living rebuke to the principles of our democratic system. At the same time, our leaders tell us that we need Robert Mueller, an all-powerful, unelected prosecutor accountable to no one, to protect us from threats to, brace yourself here, democracy. Nobody in Washington catches the irony in any of this. Mueller himself is a threat to our democracy, the most powerful man elected by nobody. Our media don't ask questions about any of this or even acknowledge that it is a question. They've chosen sides. Here's Roger Stone from our show on Friday night.
It's disconcerting that CNN was aware that I would be arrested before my lawyers were informed. So that's disturbing. If it was a dangerous situation, which would merit the SWAT team, well, then CNN's cameraman would be in danger. I don't know why they would be allowed to be there.
So that's a fair question, no matter who asks it. And many began asking it within minutes of Stone's arrest on Friday morning. How did CNN know about a raid that was supposed to be secret? Did they learn from Mueller's team? Well, CNN reacted angrily to the question. We're reporters, they said. We're not state media. We didn't collude with the feds. We used reporters' intuition. Yesterday, CNN President Jeff Zucker dispatched his minions to bat down further questions on this topic. Watch.
On the right, on the fringes of the right, a conspiracy theory spread, and I won't get into it, but it was about CNN and Robert Mueller, and it spread
That we were tipped off by Mueller.
Sure.
Give me a break.
Right, to embarrass Roger Stone and to record his arrest, so I guess it would embarrass him. It's like they were saying it's propaganda. A lot of people, including some mainstream commentators and journalists, started asking questions about this conspiracy theory. And I think as journalists, we have to be very careful not to allow bad faith actors to hijack the conversation and to move the story away from what it really should be.
Save that tape. It's one for the ages because it summarizes everything. So just to recap what you just heard, we journalists, says CNN, need to fight back against the, quote, fringes of the right who just want to, quote, move the story away from what it should really be, end quote, which, it goes without saying, CNN decides. They decide what the story should really be, and if you don't agree, you're on the fringes of the right. In other words, shut up, you guys. Stop asking questions we don't feel like answering. But this show persisted because that's our job. And so we asked both CNN's official spokesman and the kid you saw playing media reporter on the screen a very simple question. Did Mueller's office help you with your story? The response, of course, feigned outrage. How dare you? You're right wing. Be quiet. But when we kept pressing them, an interesting thing happened. They didn't deny it. So to be totally clear, here's the specific question that we asked. Quote, did federal law enforcement officials confirm the raid on Roger Stone's house to CNN before it happened? Very simple question. And when we pressed it, CNN dropped the fake outrage. They just refused to answer. Because, of course, CNN talked to Mueller's people before the raid. There was never any doubt about that. All the barking aside, Mueller wanted the raid on Roger Stone's home caught on tape and publicly aired as a warning to other disobedient witnesses about what can happen to you if you step out of line. CNN was happy to oblige. So CNN acted as the public relations arm of the Mueller investigation, as they have before, and then they lied about it in the most self-righteous possible way and sent those kids out on TV to lie some more. So it answers a lot of questions. No wonder CNN seemed so eager to defend Friday's raid and to belittle and attack and marginalize anyone who asked honest questions about it. The network is no longer covering Robert Mueller. They're working with Robert Mueller, and you should know that as you watch it. Kim Strassel writes for the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and she joins us tonight. Kim, great to see you. So before we get into any of what we've just been talking about, there was news today from the administration that the Mueller investigation is reaching its final stage. Do you think that's true? And what does that mean exactly?
I hope so, Tucker, because 2 years of this is 2 years too long. We need some answers. It needs to happen soon. This could be the best thing that happened to the country in a very long time, if it is indeed finishing up.
Well, that's, I mean, what a distraction from a lot of important things that are happening. So as someone who covers the criminal justice world for a living, give us some perspective. Late middle-aged guy, no history of violence, no passport, no firearms in the home, under investigation for over a year, emails and texts already in the possession of the prosecutor. Would you send dozens of armed men to arrest him? Is that normal?
No, of course not. Of course not, and of course it's not normal. And as you said, the standard operating procedure here would be to call his lawyer and ask him to surrender. And I think it gets to the other point of your opening as well, too. Mr. Mueller, unfortunately, does not answer to anyone. And as a result, we can bring up these topics. You can call and ask the question, why did you do it? He doesn't have to answer it, and he doesn't have to answer to anybody in the end. And that is one of the reasons that we should hope that all of this is ending, especially when you look at the list of people he's gone after and the crimes for which they've been gone after. Nearly all of them crimes that he claims that they have committed after he was appointed as special counsel, not any for the time period he was actually asked to investigate, at least not of Americans.
So as a constitutional question, how in a democratic republic can you have someone who's accountable to no elected person, who's accountable to no voters, in other words? I thought all power in the government emanates from voters, but Mueller stands apart. How can this be constitutionally allowed?
Well, legal scholars have had a lot of problems with the special counsel law for a long time, partly on reasons that you just mentioned, and also on accountability questions as well, too. Now, look, in theory, he can be fired, okay? But what we both understand is that politically he can't be fired because of the brouhaha that would come up if anybody were to actually tell him to step down.
So why doesn't this, apart from what you think of Trump, or maybe you believe Trump is a secret agent working for Vladimir Putin, but even if you believe that, why wouldn't, and you were a liberal, why wouldn't you be very worried about a prosecutor who was operating wholly outside the system and accountable to nobody? I mean, if you really cared about democracy, that would terrify you, wouldn't it?
Well, we've seen the left change their view on all kinds of things, Tucker. Remember, this is a party that at one point cared about abusive law enforcement tactics. They cared about the things you just mentioned, accountability, making sure that there was accountability in democracy and that someone had to answer to someone else. But when it comes to Donald Trump, they're quite happy to throw all of that on the other side. And it's been very frustrating to people like me who've been trying to write about Mr. Mueller's probe in an objective way and look at the evidence out there in an objective way and say, look, would anybody like to see what happened to Carter Page happen to anybody else on the basis of the opposition research that they used? The Democrats should be very worried that a future Justice Department might do this to one of their candidates, and no one should want that.
I will defend that candidate if it ever happens. I mean it. I think this is totally wrong. Kim Strassel, thank you very much for that perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Michael Caputo was an advisor to the Trump campaign. He's had his own experiences with the Mueller investigation. He joins us tonight. Michael, thanks very much for coming on. I withheld judgment on Mueller, for over a year, wanted to think the best, former head of the FBI. But watching what happened on Friday at Roger Stone's home has, I think, ripped the veil off the guy's an authoritarian nutcase to do something like that. Were you surprised by it?
After we saw what went down with Paul Manafort and the story we heard detail by detail without any cameras present, I think it matches exactly what happened to Paul. And I think just like when it happened to Paul, people are going to complain and scream to the high heavens about how Soviet this tactic is, and it will do nothing. It will fall on deaf ears. And Robert Mueller, and by the way, the Department of Justice has verified that they can do this to anyone in America. I was surprised, I guess, for a minute. But the one thing I can't figure out is, the CNN camera is going to serve Roger Stone better than it does the Mueller team, because look what we were all able to witness.
No, that's a really good point. So are you convinced, as I am becoming, that Mueller did this for a reason, not just because he doesn't like Roger Stone? By the way, I should just note, I've texted a lot with Roger Stone, as many people in the media have, and Stone was always saying things like, I know Mueller's reading my texts, and being provocative. He clearly was reading his texts. Mm-hmm. But that this was designed to send a message to other people Mueller is investigating that if you step out of line will hurt you.
Right, and I'm a witness in this jackpot, but my attorney, who's former New York State Attorney General, former U.S. prosecutor, told me you can flip from a witness to a subject to a target in the blink of an eye with a group like this. So anybody who they have talked to, I think there's a couple, 3 dozen who they've interviewed. This was a message sent to us that at any time you can get a knock on your door and 29 men will come with automatic weapons, which, by the way, it's not only more than they sent to go after bin Laden, it's 29 more men than they sent to Benghazi to pick up and defend our own men.
I mean, I'm not defending Putin. I'm just pointing out the obvious. Putin's never done anything like that in this country, I have to say. We don't live in terror of Putin doing this here. So it tells you a lot.
But you know what? He does it all the time in Russia. And for all of us who have been concerned about Russia's involvement in our elections, we have to realize that we are now living in Russia. This is what Vladimir Putin does. I lived there for 7 years before Vladimir Putin took over. It was happening then, too. And, that's where we are today.
Yeah, well, I don't want to live in that country.
I'll tell you, Tucker, the one thing I'm really concerned about is Roger's funding. That's why I'm trying to help him raise money at Roger Stone, GoFundMe.com. Yep. He's going to have to come up with $100,000 every 2 months until this thing's over, because he's fighting it to the end.
That's unbelievable. Michael Caputo, thank you very much. We have a Fox News alert. Police say 5 police officers have been shot in the city of Houston. Trace Gallagher is on the story and joins us now. Trace?
Hi, Tucker. This was a narcotic warrant being served on a southeast Houston home, and police have only confirmed that at least one suspect was inside that home, and a neighbor says she heard at least a dozen rounds being fired. Houston police, as you say, have confirmed 5 officers were shot. 2 of them are critical. 3 are stable. All 5 have been taken to Memorial Hermann Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center. Police say 1 suspect is dead, and despite numerous reports of 1 or more other suspects being barricaded inside the residence, police have no word on other suspects. In fact, SWAT teams are now on scene using robotic cameras to search for any other potential suspects. We should note a neighbor did say earlier that he could hear police trying to negotiate with somebody inside, which is not to say there was someone inside. Along with Houston police, the Harris County Sheriff's Department and Department of Public Safety are also on scene, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott is allocating any needed resources. Again, 5 officers shot. 2 of them are critical. 3 of them are stable. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks a lot for that sad story. Yep. The 2020 campaign is ramping up, and the leading candidates are racing leftward so quick it'll make your head spin. Mark Stein's been watching carefully, joins us with his assessment next. The Democratic presidential field is big and getting bigger. Kamala Harris of California has tried to be the most left-wing of the candidates, but suddenly that's not so easy. Hillary Clinton has said that she hasn't ruled out a run, so expect an announcement any day, or a non-announcement. And then in a Sunday interview, the CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, said that he might run as an independent. He was immediately attacked by Democrats as a Jill Stein equivalent. Chaos, basically. Fox Washington correspondent Kristen Fisher has been following this and joins us tonight. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Tucker. Well, Kamala Harris, she sure spent a lot of time in that speech going after President Trump and his policies. She called his wall a medieval vanity project, and she called his policy of separating families at the border a human rights abuse. As for her own policies, though, she's proposing tax reform that would reverse the Republican-passed tax cuts, criminal justice reform. She says that she's running so no parent has to teach their young son that police officers, and I'm quoting here, stop him, arrest him, chase him, or kill him because of his race. And she also wants universal pre-K and debt-free college and Medicare for all. Now, on that last point, another possible 2020 contender is calling free health care as false a promise as the wall. The Starbucks billionaire Howard Schultz is infuriating many Democrats by threatening to run as an independent, which could split the anti-Trump vote and help him win a second term.
I am seriously thinking of running for president. I will run as a centrist independent, outside of the two-party system. We're living at a most fragile time. Not only the fact that this president is not qualified to be the president, but the fact that both parties are consistently not doing what's necessary on behalf of the American people and are engaged every single day in revenge politics.
And since we're speaking of revenge politics, Hillary Clinton may be considering running again. CNN is reporting that Clinton has told people that she's not closing the doors to the idea of running in 2020, but there are other reports that say that that report is not true. So it's still a long shot, but Tucker, I think it's safe to say that President Trump wouldn't mind running against her again in 2020.
That'd be a remarkable race.
Wouldn't it?
We would cover that gladly. Kristen Fisher, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Author and columnist Mark Stein has spent endless hours at the dog track and always wins, so he's perfectly qualified to handicap all political races, including this one. Mark, great to see you. Who jumps?
That mechanical hair is not going to run, Tucker.
No,
we are not going to be seeing a third Hillary Clinton term. I bet that's
true. So who jumps out? Does anyone jump out as interesting, as saying something unexpected, as maybe the Trump of this cycle on the left?
Well, what's interesting, I think, about this cycle, and that's another reason why Hillary is all wrong for it, is that this time round, and it's unfortunate for Bernie Sanders himself, but actually everyone is running as Bernie. If you look at Kamala Harris's platform, free pre-kindergarten for everybody, even if you think that's a good idea, Do you want a secretary of pre-K in Washington organizing that for 350 million people? The universal health care, the universal free college. This is a party that is actually moving left at an astonishing rate. And the difference between now and then when Hillary won is that basically everyone is Bernie. Everyone is Bernie, and there's no room for a Hillary. Even old Joe Biden, when he stands up there, he doesn't even know the term systemic racism. He keeps calling it systematic racism, and systematic is what slavery was. And all the nice editors correct it for him and clean it up for him in his speech. But he's basically trying to be Bernie Sanders, too.
Poor guy. He's too old to be woke. What about Bernie himself? I mean, does he have a shot in a field full of lookalikes?
Well, that's an interesting question. I happen to be every so often in the adjoining booth in my quarter of northern New England at the diner to Bernie's key advisors. And they actually figure out that if you're as old as Bernie is, then running against the 74-year-old incumbent is your best shot. And it's actually an interesting question whether the reason Bernie can get away with full-blown socialism is because he is so old, and that when you actually hang it around someone in the relative bloom of youth, like Kamala Harris, whether that doesn't actually make the full horror of the unaffordable lavishness of the program seem more evident.
That's a deep point. I think it's easier to take from Bernie, because you at least say, well, he's like a kind of legitimate Soviet. You know, he was old enough to remember.
Well, like he's like the genial old uncle. It seems less menacing. As for the Starbucks guy, when it's polls are closing in Florida at 7 o'clock, that's the only place in America where the lines are longer and slower than Starbucks. So this is a natural career move for that guy, I would say.
Yeah, he's the world's biggest operator of homeless shelters now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great to see you. That's right.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Good to see you. We're often told there are no problems at the border. There is no border crisis, and you're a nutcase if you think otherwise. Tell that to the latest mass caravan headed straight for our southern border. We've got details on that with Buck Sexton after the break. Jerry Brown is the governor of California. You may have read that he's designated his wife the state's first partner. That's how hip and modern Gavin Newsom is. But that's not all. He's also decided he doesn't want to live in the governor's mansion in Sacramento anymore. Instead, Newsom is moving into a $3.7 million estate in an upscale suburb. Newsom has kids, and he calls the neighborhood more kid-friendly than Sacramento. The problem is that Gavin Newsom cares deeply about climate change. He says that a lot. He cares a lot more about it than you do. He's a really good person. For an ardent environmentalist like Newsom, the California governor's mansion is a perfect place to live. It's within walking distance of the state capitol. It's a no-emission commute. His new home is an hour-round trip for the entire entourage, the frosted window suburban entourage. That's a big carbon footprint. There goes the planet. And there's another problem, too, maybe a bigger problem. Newsom also cares about diversity. He talks about diversity a lot, probably about as much as he talks about climate change. And for diversity aficionados, Sacramento is heaven. In 2002, Harvard University and Time magazine described Sacramento as, quote, America's most diverse city. The city's public school students speak 43 languages. About 40% don't speak English at home. You would think Gavin Newsom would want his kids right there in the center of all that diversity. But no. Instead, he's moving them to one of the least diverse neighborhoods in the entire state of California. It's a place where the demographics look like 1950. In other words, it's very, very white, which is something that Newsom thinks is very, very bad, or says he does. But does he really believe it? Not really, because he's moving his family there. You're starting to figure out how this works? So you make policies that totally change the country, then you attack anyone who criticizes those policies as evil, and then force them to be quiet or fire them if they won't. And then you personally move as far as you can away from the effects of those policies, preferably behind a wall somewhere. That's the trick. And to be fair, it's not just Gavin Newsom who does this. They all do that. All of them. Well, it's well established, at least on TV, that there is no crisis at all on the U.S.-Mexico border. The very idea of that is insane.
Trump and Republicans continue to lie about basic facts. The truth is, there's no crisis at the border that justifies a government shutdown.
There is no crisis at the border. So you've got to start from the place that everything the president's saying is fiction. So it's very hard to negotiate with someone who's dealing with a made-up problem.
These guys would literally say anything. Like, there's nothing they wouldn't say. And now they're saying it's a made-up problem. It's all just a fever dream, a product of your deranged imagination. But wait, there is that 12,000-person caravan coming up right now from Central America, and Mexico's new governor is making it easier for them to get here. Or did we just dream that up, too? Buck Sexton is a former CIA analyst, now with The Hill. He's recently been on the border, and he joins us with an update. So, Buck, it's made up, this crisis on the border. Does that comport with what you've seen?
No, members of Congress that say that either haven't been to the border or haven't even taken the time to speak to members of Border Patrol or Immigration and Customs Enforcement about the many layers of crisis that are occurring right now at the border. On one front, you just have now the increase in very serious medical cases. And this is problematic at a number of levels. You have people who are showing up, as we know, there are already 2 children who died in custody. They were ill when they entered custody, but there are many people that are now coming into Border Patrol custody, and in most cases, or in many cases, they're surrendering. So they're actually actively seeking out Border Patrol, knowing that they're going to get medical services. They're actually having to set up now screening facilities, frontline screening facilities for Border Patrol to deal with people showing up who have H1N1 flu, scabies, a whole list, a whole litany of different communicable, very serious diseases that they have to be treated for, by the way, courtesy of the taxpayer. That often requires taking them to the nearest hospital, which takes 1 or 2, depending on the sector, Border Patrol agents to accompany them to the hospital. All of this, of course, paid for by Uncle Sam. And then you also have to deal with the drain on resources. Border Patrol guys saying, look, we've got enough problems as it is. They had about 30,000, close to 30,000 family units alone. That doesn't include unaccompanied minors. It doesn't include people that are just trying to cross illegally the old-fashioned way by themselves, that are showing up, turning themselves in. And now what's happening is Border Patrol is being turned into a de facto Red Cross on our border for people who are coming up with serious illnesses, diseases, people who are 8 or 9 months pregnant. This is happening in increasing numbers every month. So the problem, Tucker, is actually getting worse while people are going on TV saying there is no problem.
Well, it's not happening in their neighborhoods. And we need to bring all of this awesomeness you describe into the neighborhoods of the people making these policies, and maybe they'll have a different view of them. So let me ask you, since you've spoken recently to a lot of people who work down there enforcing our immigration law, do they think there's a crisis? I mean, is there any doubt in their minds?
No doubt at all. I mean, they're certain that there is a crisis that's also getting worse when you look at the strain and the drain on overall border resources. That includes the enormous and now even bigger, because of the shutdown, backlog in the courts. It includes the way that the asylum system has not been addressed so that Congress really has to actually pass laws. Because right now, if you understand the system, there are many different ways to game it. You can come into the country effectively and skip the entire line and stay in the United States. And even though you won't get asylum in the end, you'll be in the interior of the U.S. That has to be addressed by Congress. There's also a crisis of lawlessness. I mean, one thing I think is interesting is when you see all these people who are going on TV and saying, you can't lie to the FBI, you can't lie to the federal government when it has to do with the Mueller probe. Well, the same laws apply, same laws about lying to federal officers to Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And people who are showing up renting or, borrowing children of other people, pretending that that's fraud, Tucker. That's actually illegal. You can't do that.
How many of those felonies do we prosecute?
I think they've gotten about under 100 for the last 12 months of the estimated thousands that are probably occurring. They don't really know. They don't have the time. They don't do DNA checks at the border. They don't have the ability to process this. Essentially, they have overwhelmed the system, not just with medical requests, but they've overwhelmed the system with lawlessness because U.S. attorneys won't even take up the cases now of, as I was told, 30-something-year-olds saying that they're teenagers so they can skip to the front of the line. That's illegal, too. The same law that sends people like Stone possibly to jail for alleged lying to federal agents can send people to jail.
But here's the difference, if I can just say, none of those people volunteered for the Trump campaign, and if they had, they'd be in jail right now.
That is probably
so they're probably smart enough not to do that. Buck Sexton, great to see you as always.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, the arrest of Roger Stone is being touted as proof positive of Russian collusion. Does it actually show that? We'll unpack it after the break.
Hi, I'm Caleb, and this is my story.